Send out your light and your truth that they may lead me, for you are my God and my King. Amen. During an interview with poet, editor, biographer Carl Sandburg, a reporter asked, "In your opinion, what is the ugliest word in the English language?" Sandburg reflected a while, his face nodded in thought. After a long, pregnant pause, his eyes brightened and he returned to the reporters. "The ugliest word is exclusive." I heard this story twice in 1 week. The first time I was punching through radio stations in a rental car, trying to find something to listen to, as you do in a rental car. When I heard it, I thought, well, that's interesting. The second time I was reading a newspaper article. That time I thought, apparently this is something I'm supposed to pay attention to. Whether we consider exclusive ugly depends on whether we are the ones excluded or not. Because by definition, somebody is excluded. We take pride in being members of exclusive clubs, living in gated communities, vacationing in exclusive resorts, belonging to exclusive churches. Being an insider provides a sense of security. But when we are the outsiders, treated as if we're not good enough, when we aren't invited to the party that everybody's talking about, when you are rejected, pushed aside, or simply left out because of who you are, where you are from, your life circumstances, excluded, it hurts. When I was on executive council for the Episcopal Church and was at General Convention, we were expected to support the events sponsored by the church. So I went to a reception put on by the development office. This was camp day also, and I believe I was wearing my Paradise Point t-shirt and jeans. As I entered, I said hello to the temporary director of the development office, a man I'd never met before. Then I went to talk with the development officer over the western part of the United States, a person I did know. In less than a minute, the director came and got her to go talk to someone else. Because of my appearance, he decided I had no money and wasn't worth their time. It was obvious, and I was angry. I was plotting ways to let him know who he had snubbed. But I do it too. I was walking in a park recently and saw a big biker-looking guy fishing. He had this large, elaborate cross tattooed on his arm. My first thought was, wow, because it was gorgeous. But my second thought was, but I bet you don't even go to church. Exclusivity, the insiders and the outsiders. That's what we have in our readings today. Today in our gospel reading from Matthew, we meet Matthew. St. Matthew is one of my favorite saints because he is the patron saint of tax collectors, customs officers, security guards, bankers, and accountants. And Matthew, who is known as Levi in the Gospels of Mark and Luke, is an outsider. He is a tax collector. He is Jewish, but works for the Roman authorities. The people of ancient Israel despised the Jewish tax collectors. They regarded them as shameless crooks who committed the twofold crime of collaborating with the heathens and preying on their own people. You see, the tax collectors didn't just collect the taxes owed to Rome. They were allowed and even encouraged to squeeze everything they could out of the citizens. They would send to Rome the amount they were supposed to collect and keep the rest. We don't know why Matthew was working in this job against his neighbors. Perhaps there were family problems. Perhaps it was just good money. But he was despised by his neighbors in Capernaum and looked down on by the Roman authorities he worked for. His only friends were other tax collectors. So Matthew was sitting at a table in the customs house, shaking down his neighbors, When Jesus walked by, Jesus said, "Follow me." To the surprise of the Roman guards, the clerks, and the taxpayers, Matthew got up, left the money where it lay on the table, turned his back on his life of government-sanctioned larceny, and joined the handful of men we know as the apostles. There is some discussion about whether Matthew actually wrote the Gospel of Matthew. I sort of think it unlikely, as evidence in the Gospel itself showed it was probably written in 80 or 90 CE, which is about how old Matthew would have been if he were a contemporary of Jesus. And there is really very little known about Matthew's life after Jesus' ascension and the apostles scattered to spread the news of Jesus' life, death, and resurrection. Some say he went to Ethiopia or to the region near the Caspian Sea. There's even a claim he introduced Christianity to Ireland. But his later life is really a mystery. If he had written this gospel in his 80s or 90s, we would know about his later life. But I have no problem attributing it to my favorite saint, an outsider. And he is certainly an outsider. At dinner, the Pharisees even make a point of it when they see Jesus dining with Matthew and his tax collector friends. Why does he eat with them? They ask the disciples. Jesus basically says, I'm here for the outsiders. But apparently not just for outsiders. As Jesus is speaking to the Pharisees, a leader of the synagogue, definitely an insider, finds Jesus, kneels before him, and begs him to bring his daughter, who has just died, back to life. So Jesus and his disciples get up and go to help. And then comes the story of the Bible that I identify with the most, the hemorrhaging woman. Not because she is hemorrhaging, but because of the way she acts. We hear more about her in the Gospel of Mark, which is actually kind of weird because he tends to be more to the point generally. But in Mark, we learn she's been suffering hemorrhages for 12 years. She spent everything she's had on physicians trying to get help. And as long as she had money, as long as she had money to pay them, they promised her a cure. Once she ran out of money, the physicians determined her to be incurable and turned away. Like the leader of the synagogue, she truly believes in Jesus. But where he asked for laying on of hands, she thinks she can get away without asking, believing that just by touching the hem of his cloak, that she could be better. But here's the thing, and it's the thing that convicts me. She doesn't ask. She thinks she can get what she needs by herself without anybody knowing, without taking the chance of being told, no, you're not worthy. You're not good enough. Understand that because of her hemorrhaging, she's considered unclean. And she's been unable to participate in temple life for 12 years. The temple was the heart of the community, and she couldn't go. She was an outsider. She's being pulled along with the crowd around Jesus, and she reaches out when no one is looking and touches the hem of his cloak. What she hadn't anticipated was Jesus felt it. Remember that Jesus doesn't know she's there, hasn't been told of her need, but Jesus turns around. Can't you picture her? Oh, crap. If it were me, I'd probably use a stronger word. But Jesus tells her, take heart, daughter. Your faith has made you well. And instantly she was made well. She may actually be the original, it's better to beg for forgiveness than ask for permission person. Then Jesus goes on to revive the daughter of the leader of the synagogue. Outsider, insider. Outsider, insider. Jesus includes the excluded. It's inclusivity at the table in our reading, eating with the outsiders, is an indictment against the status quo. How often do we exclude those who are different? The church is very good about feeding ministries, but how often do we sit down with those we feed? We provide warm clothes and toiletries, but do we listen to their stories? We heard the stories of one who asked for help, the leader of the synagogue, and the one who didn't, the hemorrhaging woman. We help those who ask. How can we find those who need help but are afraid to ask? Let us not be an exclusive church, but a beautiful, inclusive one in our membership, our associations, and our ministries. Amen.